USC is coming off of a very impressive win over Michigan on Saturday night in the Coliseum, but the Trojans haven't exactly been road warriors, and going to South Bend, facing a 4-2 Notre Dame team, is going to be a tall task for this group. Are they up to the challenge? Well, let's preview and predict USC Notre Dame.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
I freaking love this rivalry. They call it the greatest intersectional rivalry in college football. Well, there's not a lot of competition as far as intersectional rivalries. What are we talking about? Notre Dame, Stanford, Air Force against like Army or Navy, but I digress. Everything about this matchup throughout the years oozes college football. The Cardinal and Gold against the Blue and Gold. You've got Touchdown Jesus. You've got Tommy Trojan. You've got Fight On. You've got the Victory March. The fight songs are absolutely elite. Two of the best. These uniforms are always on point, whether Notre Dame is wearing the blue jerseys or they're wearing the green jerseys, which they do bring out in this matchup. We'll see if they do that on Saturday night. There's just so much to love. The championships, the Heisman Trophy winners, everything about this is what is great about college football. And I know there have been some rumblings lately about neutral site and Netflix as it pertains to the future of this rivalry, which is not guaranteed, but I beg you, keep the college in college football. Keep this game on campus and keep this game on the schedule. I've been spending some time really thinking this week, thinking about where I was 20 years ago this week. In 2005, maybe the greatest college football game I've ever seen between Notre Dame and USC. I remember so much about that game, even though I was like a teenager. I remember Tom Zibikowski in a punt return. I remember Dwayne Jarrett making that clutch catch along the sideline. I remember the chaos at the end of that matchup. I remember, of course, Reggie Bush pushing Matt Leinart into the end zone and keeping that outstanding winning streak alive. And the Yankees of college football keeping it going at that moment in time. It brings back the feels because everybody looks to that USC Texas National Championship as like the game of all games, but you wouldn't have had that if you didn't have this in South Bend. Man, I absolutely love this matchup. 93rd all-time meeting between these two, but in recent memory, this one has really favored the Fighting Irish. USC has only won just one game out of the last 7 against the Leprechauns. It was Lincoln Riley's first season in 2022, so they're looking to get off the schneid. Let's look at the F+ ratings as it pertains to these two teams, where they stand as far as these analytical measures. Notre Dame is 5th overall. That's 3rd on offense, 14th on defense. You go to USC, they are 12th overall in F+. First, they're the number 1 OF+ offense out there, but 53rd on the defensive side of the football. I think when you're looking at this particular matchup and you love offense, this is the place to be. Whether you're in the stadium in South Bend or you're watching on NBC, offense, offense, offense. Notre Dame is a 9.5-point favorite. They're the 13th ranked team in the country. USC is the 20th ranked team in the country. The over-under, pretty high for this one. It sits at 61.5. It all goes down Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time over there on NBC. And I kind of believe this has the potential to really be an playoff elimination game. I could see it really for both teams, specifically, obviously, for Notre Dame. They've already got 2 losses, and if you look at the rest of their schedule, they don't really have a lot of opportunity to get ranked or quality wins. So this is obviously a must-win game for the Irish. You look on the other side for USC, they already have a loss. They got games down the road. They got to play Nebraska, who's a ranked team. They got to play Oregon on the road at Autzen. That's not going to be easy at the end of the year. So they can lose this game and then win out with no room for error and probably still be in a good position to make the playoffs. But if you want to be able to breathe a little bit, this is a great opportunity for USC to really make that statement, jump in those rankings, and be in a really good position to maybe even fall a little bit later on in the season and still be able to get into the tournament when all is said and done. So when we talk about offense, specifically throwing the ball, you got to start with these two quarterbacks, man, and they are really good, and I love watching both of them. Let's start with CJ Carr. He is a pretty significant passing upgrade for the Irish. All right, let's just put it that way. All due respect, Riley Leonard was a freaking warrior last year, man, carrying that team with his legs and his experience to the national championship game. But CJ Carr is just a quarterback that's like made in a lab. You can see why he had as many stars attached to his name coming out of high school that he did. He's got fantastic touch on the ball. He's got arm strength. He can rip the ball. He can drop the ball into a bucket. Like, he can do so many things, and it's really fun to watch this offense operate. And I think what really makes the passing attack so good for Notre Dame, not only is CJ Carr, that's certainly a pretty big chunk to the pie, but this offense, this passing offense, can really stress you out with 3 guys across the formation, 4 guys across the formation, 5 guys across the formation. There's I don't know if there's a great or elite pass catcher wide receiver on this team, like say a Mekhi Lemon or a Jacoby Lane for USC. Notre Dame doesn't have a guy like a Mekhi Lemon, but I think there's more depth in really good players out here on the perimeter for the Irish. Of course, it starts with Jordan Faison, a smaller, quicker receiver that can really get into the open spot. 376 yards and 2 touchdowns this season. There's some size. There's some good size out there, and it's death taxes and Notre Dame tight ends. It's one of those schools that produces that position really good. Eli Raridon, 20 catches, 342 yards. He's the second leading receiver at the tight end position. So USC safeties, outside linebackers, who's ever going to match up on this guy, they need to be able to defend his size and his athleticism as well. They got a big outside wide receiver in Malachi Fields, 6'4", 222 pounds. That's a big frame out there. He's caught 18 balls, 339 yards, and 2 scores this year. And former Wisconsin Badger Will Pauling to boot at 243 yards and 3 touchdowns. So they distribute the ball fairly evenly. So they can hit you on the outside, they can go across the middle, and it just it makes you puts a lot of pressure on your defense that your corners, your safeties, your nickels, everybody's got to be able to be really good. And CJ Carr, I think, has the intelligence at the quarterback position. At least that's what we've seen on tape so far, that he can really diagnose what the defense is doing, and he can get it to the high end. I also didn't mention Jaden Greathouse, who's in there as well. So there's so many guys that can line up and that can beat you in a given situation right now for Notre Dame. I think there's good matchups for Notre Dame to have a good amount of success against USC's defense, because when you look at the Trojans' defense, the weakness is in the secondary. That should not be a surprise to anybody right now. USC is 102nd in the country in defensive yards per play, whereas Notre Dame is 5th in the country in offensive yards per play. 36.4% of drives for USC's defense has averaged 7 or more yards per play. That's 112th in the country. So there's been drives for USC, for the Trojans, where they've been giving up chunk plays on some of these drives. In contrast, 44.8% of Notre Dame's offensive drives have averaged 7 or more yards per play. So USC is kind of giving up chunk yards in some of these plays, whereas Notre Dame is getting chunk yards. That's 9th in the country, that 44.8% as well. USC has allowed over half, 52.3% of the available yards on defense this season. That's, hey, if it starts at the 30, that's 70 yards. What percentage of the 70 yards are you giving up? It's over half right now for the Trojans. That's 90th in all of college football. So the defense needs to be dialed in. Danton Lynn needs to put forth his best game plan, and he's going to be up at night. And how to defend what Notre Dame is putting out there right now. Let's move over and talk about USC offensively. Jade Mayava is statistically the best quarterback in the Big Ten right now. Talent-wise, it might be Fernando Mendoza, but Jaden is doing his thing right now. Over 1,800 yards, has completed over 70% of his passes. And I've said this before, but I think it's worth saying again. If you doubted what Lincoln Riley can do developing the quarterback position, maybe if you think he lost his fastball with what happened with Miller Moss last year, look at Maeva. Like, this guy was a raw talent transferring in last year from UNLV. This offseason, spring ball, fall camp, he's developed him into one of the most talented quarterbacks in the Big Ten, if not all of college football, and one of the most prolific offenses right now in the entire country. That's really, even in that loss to Illinois, they were able to move the ball up and down the field. So they're having their way with pretty much everybody they play this season. Makai Lemon is, wow. I mean, what else can you say about him? I mean, wow. You can describe him in so many words, but maybe it just comes down to wow is what you really need to say about him. He's unstoppable. He's an unguardable force. He leads the Big Ten in receiving yards with 682 this season. This is crazy. His worst game of the year was against Purdue. 5 catches, 63 yards. Some guys and some teams would die for a stat line like that from their best wide receiver, but that's his worst game so far. Since that game in his last 3 against conference opponents, how about 28 catches, 371 yards, and 4 touchdowns? They do so much with him. They send him in motion. They work him on tunnel screens. They work him across the middle. They work him deep. They work him in so many concepts against so many defenders. It's really tough to handle where they're going to line him up. Are they going to line up inside, or is he going to line up outside? That's, I think, the beauty of Makai Lemon is you can't really lock in on him because they move him around and do so much with him in their offensive formations right now. I think for this offense, another key to their success on Saturday night is going to be the health of Jacoby Lane. Of course, that other great receiver, kind of a taller guy and a longer body, can go up and get the football. Of course, he's getting closer to 100%. It sounds like he's maybe around somewhere like 75 or 80 right now. But 75 or 80% of Jacoby Lane is still a pretty good wide receiver. I think the success that USC has throwing the ball could come down a lot to the health of them, because Notre Dame could bracket Makai Lemon. They could do, like in basketball, they box and one him, right? They do anything to be able to isolate him. We got to stop this guy. So if USC has other weapons, and I know there's other weapons like a Tanuk Hines and some of these other guys for USC, but I kind of talked about the depth of Notre Dame. I think like the number 3, the number 4s, the number 5, it's better for the Irish, but the number 1 and the number 2, USC has superstars, guys that can absolutely take over a game. I don't know if maybe there's one guy that can absolutely take over a game for Notre Dame the way Makai Lemon and maybe a 100% Jacoby Lane can do for USC. So you got to get those guys going early. You got to get them in rhythm, and you got to be able to develop those big plays throughout the majority of the contest. Now, when you have these passing attacks, as good as they are, and I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth. I think they're going to be moving up and down the field on South Bend on Saturday night. It comes down to defense. And sometimes it comes down to which defense can make the key stops, a stop here, a stop there in the key moments. I remember that 2023 game at the Coliseum between Washington and USC. Caleb Williams against Michael Penix. They're going back and forth and back and forth. It was super fun to watch, very entertaining to watch. But what did it come down to in the fourth quarter? It came down to Washington just making a couple of stops late and holding off USC for them to be able to get the win on the road. I don't know if you're going to see quite the amount of points that you saw in that game and this game, but it kind of feels to me is like, which defense do I feel better with can make the key stops when they need to? I tend to favor Notre Dame, but let's kind of dive into the defensive side of the ball. I want to start first with Notre Dame's defense. Now, when you talk about the passing attack, in those 2 games early in the season, those 2 losses is really what I'm going to highlight right now. Because here's the thing about Notre Dame, they are this close to maybe being the number 1 team in the country and maybe having the best resume in the country. They've got 2 losses by a combined 4 points against the number 2 team in the country and the number 4 team in the country. It's tough. When you start the season with those 2 games, and now the pressure is really on you, but that's kind of how it's going. I didn't really have a problem with them still being ranked at 0-2, considering how they played and the competition they played early in the season. But I said Marcel Reed threw for 360 against Notre Dame. Carson Beck threw for 205. Jaden Mayava seems like he's going to maybe find himself somewhere in the middle in that, maybe between like 300 and 325. I could see him going for more, but that's kind of where I see Jaden right now. Now, the offensive line for USC, they've had injuries. They're not going to have Killian O'Connor at center. They say Elijah Page is progressing over there at left tackle, but, I mean, who knows? Who knows if he's going to be able to go in this matchup. But you got to give credit to USC, especially against Michigan last week. Even with some musical chairs on that offensive line, they did pretty well, and I think they played pretty well. But they've got to find a way to be able to contain Boubacar Traore, the powerful disruptor off the edge, 5.5 sacks this season. He plays with a lot of power. I don't know if he's a guy that can speed rush you every time and win that battle every time. I'm sure he can on some reps, but he's really going to work with the bull rush. He's really going to work with power. So USC, no matter who is matched up against him, they can't allow him to bull rush into Jaden Mayava to obviously throw out the timing of these routes down the field. Now, Notre Dame, I think, is pretty good in the secondary. They're led by Leonard Moore, their corner. He was named a midseason first-team All-American by both The Athletic and Sports Illustrated. They've also got Christian Gray, who was a starter on last year's team, but Moore, a lot better than Christian Gray. USC needs to take advantage when Mekhi Lemon is not matched up against Leonard Moore. But whoever is matched up against Leonard Moore is going to have a tall task on their hands because he is a lockdown corner, certainly on that side, and he's one of the best corners, and he's probably in the conversation to be as the best corner in all of college football right now. You look to the other side defensively for USC. I think they can beat you from a multitude of angles on the defensive line. They played maybe their best defensive line game of the year against Michigan, a line of scrimmage team, and they won the battle in that particular contest. So, whether it's someone like an Anthony Lucas, Jakeem Stewart, Devin Tompkins, whoever it is, I think they're going to put stress on a Notre Dame offensive line. And it is a good Notre Dame offensive line. I'll talk about that Irish unit maybe a little bit more. But they need to play more. USC I'm talking about. They need to play more like they did against Michigan and not like they did against Illinois. They kind of got pushed around a little bit against Illinois. And that goes into that road thing. Lincoln Riley teams, they have not been good on the road. They played much better at the Coliseum than they have away from the Coliseum. But more on that just a little bit later. And then when you talk about the secondary for Notre Dame, how about the secondary for USC? They got to play their best game of the year. They have to. I think Notre Dame has the advantage when you talk about all those weapons that can put the stress on USC secondary, which is probably the weakness of this group. Bishop Fitzgerald, I feel like for USC to be in a really good position, they need to force some turnovers. He's got 5 interceptions this season at safety. It's not a big group, and there's some big targets for Notre Dame. I mentioned Fields. I mentioned the tight end, Raridon, right? Outside of DeCarlos Nicholson, they don't really have a lot of bigger, longer guys that can maybe match up with what Notre Dame is throwing out there. A couple of guys, weapons that Notre Dame is throwing out there. I would expect Nicholson to be able to match up against Fields. So who's going to match up against Faison? Who's going to match up against the tight end? Who's going to match up against all these other guys? I think that's where maybe the game planning really comes into play for D'Anton Lynn. I think those are the battles where they need to play above the line that I think we're used to seeing USC certainly play right now. So which team can force a turnover? Which team can get a big sack on a third down? Which team can get the opposition into a 3rd and 15 or into a 3rd and 16 where it's next to impossible to be able to convert? Whichever defense, and it's not going to be a lot of plays. It might be a couple of plays. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5 plays throughout the entire game. But I got a feeling whichever defense is able to make those plays is going to end up on top in this particular football game. Now, we talk about the pass game so much, and there's a lot of fun stuff and sexy stuff to talk about when we talk about the pass game. And I talk about how the defense needs to, whichever defense makes a couple of stops I'm going to feel better about to win the game. But maybe the run game is going to be the ultimate equalizer in this matchup. Even though Notre Dame has, they've got an uptick throwing the ball, no doubt. It's still a team that can do what we've seen Marcus Freeman Notre Dame teams do, run the ball. They've got as good of a combination at running back as there is in college football, of course, with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. They've combined for 952 yards and 15 touchdowns through 6 games. It's as good as it gets. I mean, they're averaging 5 yards a pop, 6 yards a pop. That USC needs to play well at the line of scrimmage, because on first down, if these guys are getting 4 yards, if these guys are getting 5 yards, and they're getting close to that average, the playbook opens up a mile wide for Notre Dame at that point. Playing well against the run on the early downs is going to allow USC to, I think, be a little bit more flexible, maybe with their pressures, because I got a feeling maybe USC is going to bring a little bit of pressure, try to get CJ Carr under duress a little bit more. I know that kind of puts your corners and your defensive backs out an island, maybe not something you want, but you need to be able to disrupt CJ in any way that you can. And then you need to be able to, of course, stop the run. Notre Dame is one of 24 offensive lines that is on the Joe Moore Award midseason honor roll. So this is a good front. This is a better front than Michigan had. This is a better front than Illinois had. This will be the best offensive line that USC will have faced all year long. I think we're really going to find out just how good or not good the Trojans are up front right now. You look to the other side as far as the run game. USC, no Wayman Jordan, got injured last week, no Eli Sanders. King Miller burst onto the scene. We put the crown on him. I mean, he was fantastic. But can he have an encore? Can he have that next performance? I mean, that's I think the big question right now. And then they've got Jackson, the power back, Brian Jackson. That's going to look to maybe be the thunder to King Miller's lightning as well. I think the question we're really asking when we say, hey, can Miller and Jackson, can they really do some good things in the run game, is do you think USC's offensive line can have another great performance up front? Can they win the battle at the line of scrimmage for the second consecutive week? I think there's a potential for them to be able to do that. I don't think that this is as good of a Notre Dame run defense, like a Notre Dame interior defensive line, things like that we saw last season. I thought that unit was really good last year for the Irish. Notre Dame, 27th in the country in run defense. It's been solid, but like I said, it hasn't been outstanding. USC's ability to run the ball, I'm really curious as what they're able to do in this game, because I'm not certainly going to go out on a limb and say, hey, they're going to run the ball for 200 yards again. I'm also not going to say that they're going to rush the ball for 60 yards. Is it going to be somewhere in between? Like Texas A&M and Miami had very similar, like 120, 130 yard outputs. Guys, as a team, they rushed for like in the mid 30s as well. So can USC get that type of performance? They might need a little bit more to be able to feel good about a victory, I think, in this game. So I tend to favor the Notre Dame run game, I think, a little bit more, because those guys are just, they're beasts. And I think these other guys last week had a great game for USC, but we'll see what they can do on the road against a solid defense. All right, folks, enough talking. It's prediction time. I think this thing comes down to I think it probably comes down to a trio of things. I think it comes down to, I think Notre Dame can create more balance with their run game and maybe take more time off the clock, keep USC's offense on the field a little bit more than what USC maybe can in this game. Defensively, I think I trust the secondary more for the Irish than I do the Trojans right now. And then the road thing. A USC team on the road looks different than a USC team at home. Right now, I think the fact of the matter is, I think USC can create a lot of problems with Lemon and Lane against Notre Dame. But it's going to be difficult for me to pick Lincoln Riley on the road in this type of environment. I'm going with Notre Dame. Final score, Irish 38, Trojans 31. There's going to be yards available. There's going to be production available. Which offense is going to make the big play when they need it to? And maybe more importantly, which defense is going to step up and make the play when they need it to? Right now, I tend to feel like that's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We'll see if USC, I would be thrilled if USC could prove me wrong and knock the Leprechauns out of the playoff picture, but we'll see what happens. That's my prediction. I want to see your prediction in the comments below. This was a long one, but I really enjoyed taking a deep dive into the Trojans and the Irish. All right, until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted.